Human history is riddled with people abusing people. And no matter how hard our species tries to escape this cruel and unfortunate spectacle, it always seems to come around again and again. The hopeful among us might want to believe that our race can take rational, if even painstakingly gradual steps upward and toward a fairer, more just and nobler world. Yet it seems to me that a different and better way of looking at our species is really called for, if we will finally be able to understand why, as a human family, we seem unable to rise out of our perpetual dysfunction. Because I am writing from the point of view of an American man in the 21st century, let me apply my reasoning to our present situation. America is quick on the way to a newer and more insidious form of slavery, a final tyranny which will dwarf all historical precedents, since with America's fall, it will most malignantly infest the rest of the world. You might wonder whether such pessimism is really called for, so let me lay out why. In my previous article titled The COVID-19 Pandemic, My Story, I shared Patrick Henry's famous ultimatum of liberty or death, and I introduced John Stuart Mill's central point regarding civil liberty, that it can only be safeguarded in the context of a perpetually vigilant citizenry who are ever looking to identify and check any and all agents of tyranny against we the people. I then alluded to our newest form of tyranny today in the ultra-polarization of wealth and financial inequality in America and the world, highlighting how our present COVID-19 pandemic is contributing to this most dangerous trend via the shutdown steps we are encouraged to take by our governors. Taking to heart the skepticism that John Stuart Mill encourages regarding the more powerful among us and their proclivity to prey upon their lessers, I even alluded to the possibility that the pandemic could have been intentionally allowed to escape China via the collusion of two powers, the Chinese Communist Party and a potential 1% group arising out of the West, made bosom buddies in their mutual agenda for power and control. I also reminded my readers that all appearances to conspiracy theories need not be shunned, especially when we are seeking to remain on the alert as potential prey of the more powerful vultures among us. So let me now expand on the idea of a 1% power structure and their natural adoption of that age-old agenda of human enslavement. The greatest debate in the most recent history of our present Western-dominated civilization has been that between communism and capitalism, socialism and free enterprise. As Americans and as Westerners generally, we have been taught, with good evidence, that capitalism and free enterprise is the better option for human material flourishing. But that has been the extent of it. We have not been introduced to exactly why. Why is private property and free enterprise in a capitalistic system more productive in securing greater material abundance? Anyone with the most basic sense of human nature can probably trace the answer. Because we are, at bottom, a selfish species. Spiritually, most human beings are selfish and self-centered. Most human beings find it difficult to naturally embody a sense of universalism, goodwill, and solidarity with their fellow persons. Indeed, this very and obvious selfish foundation of human nature is the self-same reason behind the Western value for civil liberty and its advocacy for perpetual vigilance. Among a selfish race, the best chance for life comes with a protection for individual liberty of choice, freedom, and its necessary advocacy for perpetual vigilance, civil liberty. Communism and socialism, therefore, has either of two sources in human motivation. Either its espousers seek to rise to power over the rest through their talent for political persuasiveness in their normal selfish agenda, or they are utopian spirited, hopeful but nevertheless naive regarding the human condition. For on the one hand, communism results in a governing class, the majority of whom, consistent with the selfish truth of human nature, will gradually seek to use their privilege to prey upon the rest, while on the other, the subjects, or the people, being generally selfish, will find in themselves no natural motivation to be productive in a system that does not tie their own initiative to their own individual success, resulting, in the final analysis, in a larger material depression under a socialist system, a system designed not to take into account the basic truth of human selfishness. The fall of Russia and the Chinese compromise with free enterprise clearly demonstrate this truth. So how has our Western-dominated world come to a state where a 1% group, resulting from capitalism, can and probably would collude with a communist hierarchy in China to allow the introduction of a pandemic? A human tragedy aimed at securing an ultimate power class, a final domination and global tyranny. The key word here is power. For in the end, a selfish race will always produce a power class, those who most successfully competed, who, as a quintessentially selfish group, will then invariably seek to secure their domination. Let me make it clear that I am not absolutely claiming the existence of such a grand collusion. I am only tracing its possibility, which should be quite enough reason for a vigilant citizenry. We need not try and trace the identities of these people, these 1% fascists, or even if they existed, their identification would be virtually impossible to prove or even bring to the attention of a public dependent on corporate-controlled mainstream media, an institution which they would surely secure. But for my readers who require greater thoroughgoingness than mere speculation, let me share Bill Moyer's video on a book which exquisitely lays out the significance of the 1%. I have a link here. The ultimate lesson here is that a selfish species can never escape dysfunction and ignominy, for it cannot ever fully safeguard itself with any system, no matter how enlightened. But it can have one best system, the least of all evils, as it were, one which takes into account its members' truth as a selfish species, one which attempts to secure the greatest life for the greatest number by advocating for a degree of individual liberty or freedom of choice, living space, as it were, a principle which therefore encourages all its members to be perpetually vigilant. This is the Western system, the very idea that America stands for as the symbolic defender. But as we see, this is the very system that the most powerful among us, whether emerging out of capitalism or communism, are attempting to undo. In another of my previous articles titled, "Does it take a global pandemic to end a social political virus?" I write, okay, so our founding father Thomas Jefferson famously said, "I know no safe depository of the ultimate powers of the society but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, The remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. But did he realize that Babylon would have taken such a hold of his child America as to inspire its leaders to capitalize on such ignorance, far less than institute a program of citizen education and fortification? By failing to do their honorable and patriotic duty as the governors of a free nation, by failing to safeguard the American citizen's liberty by encouraging widespread national education and social enlightenment, a condition that John Stuart Mill himself tacitly advocates for when he warned that civil liberty is only possible in a civilized nation, or historical American leadership, in their own selfishness and incompetence and self-centeredness as human beings, did set the stage for this present weakening of our nation. They are indeed duly responsible for making us ripe for the pickings of a fascist one-percenter group and their power and other power tyrants of our day. Do we not clearly see that if America, the international and therefore very human experiment in civil liberty, fails, all the world falls with it? Can we not see that with the power of information technology and identity tracing, a potential final power group will be able to track all individual speech at our very, and even our very ideas, will be able to intercept all individual actions of protest at their very inception? One might argue that if such a power existed, then why are they not flexing their muscles through their corporate-controlled media and their deep state ties to Homeland Security, etc., to stop the present American protests for racial justice in the name of coronavirus safety? But let me propose that the only protest they will be interested in stopping would be the protest against their usurpations, since any protest of the people against the people only advances their agenda through the action of divide and conquer, or more to the point, in this case, distract while conquering. Some may even ask, why would such a power not act against the radical QAnon movement from calling attention to similar ideas of a covert, ultra-powerful, and socially manipulative group? But I would also propose that by allowing for, or even possibly incepting and encouraging such a conspiratorial group of over-the-top irrationality, they, the one-percenters, might actually be waging a campaign of counter-awakening, hoping that most citizens will dismiss all such ideas against the spectacle of one caricatured example. The truest evolution of human selfishness is that with power comes all corruption, and such an ultra-powerful group is sure not to benevolently rule, no matter how much delusion of benevolence some of their billionaire members may entertain. Jeffrey Epstein, a perfect example of one such another member, whether an actual member or not, clearly shows this truth. When through wealth and connection to other wealthy, one has the power to get away with one's most wicked desires, one invariably will act on these basest tendencies. The fact that he was stopped means hopefully that their one-percenter power is not yet complete, or might only sadly mean that they were merely setting an internal example of what a dissonant among their members might face. We cannot finally see, or can we not finally see, how such a world, and therefore will render all civil liberty and freedom null and void? Is it not becoming obvious to the most dull among us that such a prominently selfish prisoner as Epstein, in the most prominent city of the most prominent nation, New York of the United States, committed suicide without the most prominent journalists of the most prominent media in the world being yet able to get at truth? I am not espousing religion here, but as always, the Bible has many perfect classic examples of what a spectacle our human race can become. Quote, they called to Lot, where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them to us so that we can have sex with them. What better image of the innocent individual than angels? And what better illustration of corruption than those having the power to sexually abuse the innocent, violating his and her civil liberty and therefore very dignity? Nor should one misunderstand this reference as mainly about sexuality or even homosexuality, as much as it is about social tyranny. A corrupt state of society where the wicked-hearted and evil violate the dignity or basic civil liberty of the less powerful at will. In a final word of hope, let me say, it appears that the divine, or nature, or whatever is responsible for human existence itself, has ordained that no evil shall befall our species without warning and opportunity for reversal. So if I am but your worthy prophet, let me say on. Arise, my fellow citizens, and resist the usurpers. Realize firstly that you are only one among a multitude of fellows, all having an equal right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A state you should not, incidentally, barbarically define as exclusively materialistic. Put a check on your own selfishness and realize your spiritual aspect, for we are all in this world together. Stop discriminating against one another for ridiculous reasons, whether in the name of race, class, gender, sexuality, nationality, ethnicity, you know the list, and come together from locality to locality for face-to-face dialogue, solidarity, and self-protective civil actions. Don't let a pandemic stop you, one seemingly perfectly suited for squashing your awakening and destroying your prospects. For if you fail to do this, you will become a victim of the end result of your selfishness and ultimate cowardice, suffering a great fall into final slavery under those who have won, in their own selfishness, the position of universal tyrants. Secure your liberty or accept a living death. New American Spring. Revolution of vision, evolution of world.